As the Mandalorian tribe and their covert prepared for their attack, events were much less dramatic, rather more devious on the other side of the galaxy. Within the unknown regions was the planet of Exegol, and its past history as a vibrant planet was now forgotten by almost everyone. The desert planet had become a story of Sith legends, with the likes of Darth Noctis and Darth Sanguis searching for immortality. By the time of the Galactic Empire, Exegol will be visited by the latest Sith Darth Sidious, and the Sith Lord began to experiment with cloning and plan for life after death. With Sidious falling at the Battle of Endor, his transition to another body was not a smooth one, and one that was filled with pain. Even though Sidious was physically weak, and forced to wear an Omin harness to help him stand, the dark side energy from Exegol at least ensured his mind was intact. In the Sith Citadel was a laboratory, where both his past and present body had guided the Sith Eternal, and one of his first attempts, named Snoke, was currently acting his plans in the galaxy. Alongside the roots of the First Order, the hidden Sith had been watching the young Ben Solo since his birth 5 years ago. Even from such a remote planet as Exegol, Sidious had been able to plant dark visions in Ben's mind, but he had recently sensed a shift in the Force. Sidious had been tracking his old foe Luke Skywalker, and though his weakened body couldn't influence the Jedi Master, he noticed that he had a new student. The Sith Lord's harness started to shake as Grogu brought up visions of another Jedi Yoda. Memories of deceiving Yoda during the Clone War sent cackles across his throne room, but the Grand Master had also been partially responsible for Luke's intervention on the Death Star. The bones in the shoulders of the decrepit Sith clicked as he rubbed his hand in glee, and he saw his chance for revenge against one of Yoda's rare species. On the world of Ossus, Grogu had almost learnt everything he had been taught before Order 66, but without Din Djarin, Grogu started to feel lonely. Luke would often leave him to meditate, and after several weeks, he would find a voice in his mind. The Jedi Initiate heard the voice telling him to unlock his true power, and trying to turn him against Luke, but Grogu showed resistance. In spite of his young age for his species, Grogu could distinguish his mind from the dark tendrils of the Sith, and he soon reached out to Luke. Whilst the Jedi considered the threat of the darkness, two Sith were most displeased with his show of resistance. Darth Sidious had clearly underestimated Grogu, and secretly passed this message on to Snoke, who was then influenced to take a different approach. Reverting to his original target of Ben Solo, Snoke decided on a two-pronged attack. To try and get Ben and Grogu to turn to the dark side, he began to tell Ben to move away from both Leia and Han, and Leia would soon sense the darkness within the 4-year-old Ben. Within their apartment on Chandrila, Leia switched on her holoprojector and decided to tell Luke that Ben needed to be trained by the Jedi and help him to contain the growing darkness. The Jedi Master agreed to take Ben as the second student in the academy, but he couldn't help but be suspicious. He pondered if the probing into both Grogu and Ben's minds was somehow connected. Since the Battle of Endor, Luke had scoured the galaxy far and wide in pursuit of knowledge, as he tried to rebuild the Jedi Order. With the help of Lor San Tekka, Luke had visited worlds such as Gatalenta and Tython, recovered Jedi caches such as the one formerly owned by Jocasta Nu, and even found a sacred Jedi text on Ossus, known as the Ramagon, which contained early stories of the Jedi Order. But as Luke watched the Millennium Falcon flying through the clouds, then landed with a hiss onto the makeshift landing pad, Luke was concerned that he had been led to this knowledge. With Leia busy with senatorial duties on Chandrila, it is Han Solo who arrives to ask Luke to train Ben, and Grogu emerges from behind a nearby stone to find he was now not alone. Luke sensed a shift in the Force from Grogu, and much of his growing frustrations had been vanquished by Ben, so he decided that instead of focusing on gathering knowledge, he needed to find more students. Whilst Luke tended to his newest student on Ossus, Snoke and Sidious were pleased that the first part of their plan was proceeding as they had foreseen. Sidious planned for Ben and Grogu to push each other to the dark side, but he knew that the Order 66 survivor would require more to be turned. Whilst the Sith Lord was aware of the galaxy's Force sensitives, he was still monitoring other threats such as the Mandalorians. The Mandalorian resistance had been an irritating thorn in the Empire, so Sidious had been pleased by their decimation in the Night of 1,000 Tears. But 5 years on from that night, he had sensed their growing power and the influence of Din Djarin. Sidious had not followed the entire journey of the Mandalorian, but from what he had seen, he had been a threat to Moff Gideon on Navarro, and had established a close bond with Grogu. This was an opportunity he could not afford to let pass. As part of the second step in his plan, he influenced Snoke again, and anticipating an encounter on Mandalore, he dispatched Snoke to intervene. At the Mandalorian covert, Djarin and Vizsla were trying to plan to reunite Bo-Katan's abandoned followers, when R5-D4 received a transmission. A distressed Bo-Katan informs of an attack by TIE interceptors on her castle underworld of Kalevala. Convincing Paz Vizsla to organise a rescue, Djarin would also leave the recruitment of the deserted forces to many of the heavy Mandalorian warriors, whilst he returned to the planet of Mechis 3. Before his previous departure from the former Techno-Union planet, the Mandalorian had revived many of the rusting machines that had once churned out assassin droids for the Separatists. But on his return to the planet, the assassin droids served a different master. Djarin didn't have a droid control ship to control the droids, so with the help of R5-D4, he managed to override their programming and assigned IG-12 as their new leader. As he was about to leave the planet, Vizsla informed him of the covert's progress. Not only had they succeeded in rescuing Bo-Katan after the Kree's castle had been destroyed, but they had also recruited some of the deserters, such as Axe Woves. But as ever with Din Djarin, this success was too good to last. When leaving Mechis 3, Djarin decided to take two ships. One was his M1 starfighter with IG-12, and the other was a repaired C-9979 landing craft, which was formerly used by the Trade Federation and designed to be placed in battleships. With R5-D4 in control, Djarin ordered the droid to follow him to Mandalore, but as they navigated the network of trade routes, Djarin was met by turret fire from out of nowhere. Through his bounty hunting exploits, Djarin was normally more than capable of escaping such encounters, but it was as if the opposing pilot could read his every move. The Mandalorian barely saw the ship on his scope before his right combustion chamber was smoking, and he started to rapidly descend onto the planet below. The world was the recently conquered TIE Farer, and as Djarin spiraled through the clouds, he opted for his most desperate measure. Opening both his and IG-12's canopies, he pulled the droid out of the smouldering starfighter, and with his jetpack in place, he ejected himself out of the ship. The two landed on an abandoned spire, and they saw that somehow the M1 starfighter was mostly intact. Memories of the Razor Crest flooded back to the Mandalorian, and before he even thought about a rescue, the ship was detonated by a group of troopers, who appeared to be dressed in Imperial uniform. With no way of communicating with the Children of the Watch, he hoped that R5-D4 had at least delivered them the droids. Now without a way back, Djarin and IG-12 looked from their lofty position, and buried amongst the burnt barley fields were a series of strategically placed comm towers. The pair noticed that they led to a military base, and after avoiding the stormtroopers, they found it to be surprisingly empty, but the Mandalorian suspected a trap. Even before they could reach the hangar, a robed figure materialised in front of them, and there was nowhere to run. That is it for part 3 of this What If. If you'd like to see more of this What If, or any other video, feel free to leave your suggestions in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.